everybody, my name is Emma, this is Emma Rosen Books, and today I am filming for you my October wrap-up. Now, I read loads this month, or by my standards anyway. I think I read 6 books, maybe? So I'm looking forward to telling you all about those. Now, I'm going to quickly check on Goodreads what I read, and what was in October and what wasn't, so that I can make sure that I do them in order as well. So, the first book that I read this month was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I really enjoyed this. So I talked last month on my wrap-up about how I was reading more audiobooks because I've re-downloaded Overdrive, which is the app that I use to get audiobooks from the library, and there was a whole load of books that I haven't read because it's been a little while since I used it. That's not to say that I've read every book on there, but just the ones that I wanted to read. So anyway, Ready Player One, to be honest, I didn't really have any preconceptions about it, but because I kind of heard of it and people had said it was quite good, I thought I'd download it. And when it started, I was like, I don't know about this. Is this a little bit naff? And as it went on, I just found it more and more fun. So the idea of Ready Player One is that there's a character called Wade, and Wade has kind of a rough home life. Well, not kind of, he does have a rough home life. And in Ready Player One, it's set in the future, and everybody pretty much lives in this online world called the Oasis. And 2 people set up the Oasis. Did both of them set it up? Anyway, the main guy, was it just the one? Do you know, this is the thing, I read something a month ago, I can't remember. Anyway, the main guy involved with setting up the Oasis dies, and he has set up a challenge before he dies where he's hidden Easter eggs throughout the world, and the challenge is for people to find them, and then whoever wins these 3 challenges will win the Oasis and all of the money that's tied up in it, because everybody uses it, so whoever wins is also going to become like a multi-millionaire. And lots of people are trying to find it, and there's all these independent people called Gunters, and then there's also this like evil corporation who are using people in teams to be able to try and solve it as well, so that the corporation can win it. So it's like this competition going on. So that's kind of the concept behind it. But the other side of things is because the guy who set it up was growing up in the 80s, he has put a lot of things into these challenges and into the Oasis that are based around the 80s, because that's like all his favourite films and his favourite books and his favourite games and stuff. So a lot of, well, all of the challenges centre around things from the 80s. So the whole book is littered with references to 80s culture, as well as being about an online universe, and as well as being very gamery. So it's really aimed at a particular audience of people. And so from my point of view, initially I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit too young, because I was born in the 80s. So I don't, I was a 90s kid, really. On the other hand, though, I have 3 older brothers. One in particular was massively into computer games and stuff, and he was playing a lot of these games when I was a kid. So it wasn't as if I was totally naive, and we would watch 80s films together and as a family and stuff. So it's not like I didn't get any of the references, I got quite a lot of them. So as time went on, I was like, okay, yeah, I get this. This is kind of fun. And I flip-flopped during the book. But if you hear noises, it's my fridge. I flip-flopped during the book between, that was tacky and that was awesome. So, and by the end of the book, I was totally on board, and I was like, 5-star read, love it. So yeah, there are some bits where it does feel a little bit contrived, or quite contrived. But I think that's the fun of it. The point is that it is written for that audience. It's written for you to be like, oh my God, I remember that game, or I loved that film, or whatever. And if you are within that kind of age bracket that can enjoy it, I think you're gonna absolutely love it. That just is the point of it. And it's pretty much a hero's journey, the storyline's great, but I mean, it's not something like totally world-changing in that respect. But nonetheless, the whole concept of the dystopian future that's built in it is totally believable. There were some nice little twists and turns that I really enjoyed. But for me, the reason it was 5-star was just because I just thought it was so fun, And there were so many bits of it where I was really like laughing, not because it's meant to be comedy, but just because I was like, that's brilliant that they put that in, or whatever. My particular favourites, there was a reference to Short Circuit. By the way, one of my favourite like terrible films is Short Circuit 2, not 1, 2 is better. I absolutely love Short Circuit 2. So yeah, a little reference to that. There was loads of like references to Star Wars and Back to the Future and those kind of things. What else was there? Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. Joust, we play at home. We've got like on our Xbox, we've got like an arcade, downloaded arcade games. So there's references to that game and we've played that. And Pac-Man and all the stuff. And it was just nostalgic. As I say, if you're my kind of age, maybe some of the references will pass you by. It depends on how much 80s stuff you were exposed to, how much of the music, how much of the films, how much of the games. Particularly, I think, if you're a gamery person. But if you're an 80s kid, I think it's just really, really fun. So I really enjoyed that one. I gave it 5 stars, just in terms of just pure like enjoyability and joy. And well written. I liked it. I love a dystopian book anyway. I do love a sci-fi. Yeah, good book. Really enjoyed it. Then I read Sky by Sarah Driver. I didn't think I read that this month, or last month, October, but I guess I did. It took me a while to get through it. In fact, I think I'd been reading it from the end of September, and while I was also listening to the audiobook, because I listen to a lot of audio anyway when I'm like walking the dog and stuff. So I was still kind of going through this book. So I read the first book in this series, I think probably last year, and that's called Sea. And literally the reason I picked it up, I saw it in a charity shop. It's got the most beautiful cover and really lovely drawings inside, and I literally was just sold on the fact it looked pretty. And I read it and I quite enjoyed it. It's a kid's book, it was quite swashbuckly, also quite a bit of fantasy in there, and I didn't love it, but I quite enjoyed it, the first one. So when I saw the second one, I was like, oh, I quite like that first one, I'll pick that up, and I got it from the library. Honestly, I renewed that book so many times, and I still rate the visual side of things with that book. Again, the cover design is beautiful, there's little drawings all the way through. It's a beautiful book to behold, and I don't think that it was a bad book. I think it's very action-packed. Now for me, as soon as there's action, I get bored. It's not, and because there was so much of it, I'm alright if there's just a bit, but yeah, it's really not my thing. So yeah, it's not, as I say, it's not that it was bad. If that's your kind of thing, then great. It still had, obviously, the fantasy side of things. So what Sky was about is that there's a team of kids and they're looking for 3 opals. So they find one in the first book, and there are realms. There's the sea realm, the sky realm, and then what would the other one be? Sea and sky and I don't know, another one. Land, must be land. And so they spend adventures within that realm in order to get the sea opals, and there's all this intrigue and family stuff. I think maybe I liked the first one because it was set in the sea, and you had like mer wraiths, and it was very nautical, and maybe that's why I could kind of get through it a little bit more. Obviously, I'm not the target market. It is written for kids. I really don't think it's a bad book, but it took me so long because I just wasn't interested. I'd read a few pages and then be like, So if you want to read a series that is fantasy, but not with like loads of complicated names or anything like that, that was one of the things I liked about it. The characters are named after animals, so there's like mouse and other animals, I don't know. It's very like accessible fantasy for kids, very action-packed, good fun. Yeah, I really don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just personally found it really dull. Just not me at all. So I don't think I rated it very high. Yeah, I gave it 2 stars because for me, I rate things on how I feel about it. It just wasn't, it didn't grab my attention. But it's not to say it's a bad book. If it fits your thing, then you might enjoy it. So then I read some indie books. So Dane Cobain, his channel's called Dane Reads. He also has a channel called Dane's Vegan Journey, and he and I did a book swap, so you can go over to his channel and see some reviews of my books. So I sent my 2 books and he sent me 2 of his, which was really lovely. And so I read the 2 that he sent me this month. So the first one that I read was Driven. Actually, I think I messaged him and said, which one should I read first? And he said, read Driven. Okay. Not that they're in any order, but just that he felt that this was a good one to start with. So, Driven starts off with an actress gets hit by a car in what appears to be maybe accidental circumstances, but a hit and run essentially. And then the police investigation starts, and at the same time there's a private investigator called Leapfold. So this is the first in a series, Leapfold Book 1. And Leapfold starts investigating it as well. And the police officer, who's called Cholmondeley? Yeah, Jack Cholmondeley, I hope I said that right. And the PI are sort of working together and helping each other out to solve the mystery, because they both think that there's more to it. That it wasn't just somebody hit her and then panicked or something, that it was premeditated. So they start investigating it. Leapfold also has an assistant come to work with him, who's a girl called Malorie, and she helps the investigation, and their professional relationship develops. They get to know each other, and all that's another side of the book. So I really enjoyed this. I read this when I was away in Plymouth. I went away this month. And I read it in a day or 2, which for me is always a sign of a book I enjoy. That's the thing with Sky. It took me like 6 weeks, maybe more, to read it. Whereas Driven, I read it in a couple of days. It's very much a classic crime book. I know that Dane reads a lot of Agatha Christie, and you could definitely see elements of that he's a fan of crime books. I liked the characters. I thought with Leapfold and Malorie, for me, it really reminded me of Stieg Larsson, and I mean a very much toned down version, but in terms of there being like the old, slightly jaded, well, I mean not old, but older, jaded PI guy, and then the kind of techie, slightly alternative girl working with him, and their relationship in that respect. There was just elements of it that kind of reminded me of that relationship, not, as I said, none of the other stuff. It's not like, yeah. So, yeah, I definitely really enjoyed it. It's very twisty, turning. I love the fact that it had technical stuff in it. I do really enjoy technical stuff in books, because I am like on the edge of nerdy, as we can see from how much I love Ready Player One. It's funny because in some ways it was very modern, obviously with like the technical side of things and the fact that it's set now and stuff, but then there were also just those really warm, like nostalgic, traditional crime type feels. The way that the book comes to a close definitely had that traditional feel for me. Not somebody that's read loads and loads of crime, but yeah. So if you're a crime fan, I really recommend it. It's very readable, it's good fun. Yeah, would thoroughly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. So for me, I gave it 4 stars, really enjoyed it, very, very good book. Would definitely recommend. And of course, do check out Dane's channel as well. It's very good. He puts out so much bookish content. I think he posts every day, which is definitely something to be admired. So then I read his second book. I started reading this on my last day of the holiday, and I then finished it on the drive home, which for me, don't tend to read in the car. I'm not someone who gets massively travel sick. I was also sitting in the back, which I do get travel sick when I sit in the back. So for me to be reading and sitting in the back was like, I'm not going to be throwing up or anything, but would normally make me feel quite nauseous, and I'd be like, oh, actually I'll stop reading, I don't feel great. But it was fine. So I'm going to say the book was so good that I didn't get travel sick. So this one, for me, edged it on Driven. I liked this better. I gave them both 4 stars because we're talking about the difference between maybe like a 4-star and a 4.25, or you know what I mean? Like they were really, really close, but this one for me just edged it. So the idea of Formally is that there's a new social network where people can post things that will only become visible when they die. And then this guy called Dan starts to work for them, and even though they say to him, look, this is going to take over your life, this is this really crazy new social network, and the job is mad, and he's all for it, and so he starts working for them as a coder. and he has a girlfriend, they live together, good relationship, whatever, and he starts working with his social network and things just kind of snowball. Again, for me, the reason why, I think a big part of the reason why this book edged it for me, I really liked the techie stuff. I liked how dark it was. This felt darker than Driven did. I also liked the characters more. I felt more, I suppose, sympathetic to them. Something about this was just, as I say, edged it slightly for me. So basically you watch Dan, how this affects Dan's life, and you find out more about the social network and the people running it. And yeah, it's really good. It's not a massively long book, but it's very sort of to the point and very good. So I really, really recommend Formally as well. The only criticism I could give to Formally is I wanted more at the end. So when you find out everything that's been going on and everything reaches its conclusion, I would have liked to have found out, you do find out what happens, but I just wanted more details on how everybody's life is like totally changed. And so, yeah, I don't know, it finished and I was like, more. So that's a good way to finish a book, right? So yeah, definitely would recommend both of Dane's books. He's written others as well, so do check them out. He's got a good writing style and they're great stories, and yeah, what more is there to say? Good books. So I enjoyed those very much. Then I think, to say, I'm just looking at the order. So I read Driven and Formally. Driven, by the way, has been picked up by a publisher, so there's a new version of it with a new cover. It's being published by N-Circle, so you can check that out if you would like. So the next book that I read this month was Knife Edge by Malorie Blackman. Now, I read Noughts and Crosses last year after hearing Malorie Blackman on Desert Island Discs and thinking, oh, I haven't read that, and that sounds amazing, the way she was talking about it. So I'm going to slowly start working my way through the series. I absolutely loved Noughts and Crosses. I thought it was sensational. So really pleased to have got Knife Edge. My mother-in-law has been reading them, so we've been like passing books between us. So in Knife Edge, I don't want to give away too much because I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read Noughts and Crosses. Basically, in the fallout from the first book, you have the character Sephi. Now, in Noughts and Crosses, the idea is that ideas about race are turned upside down. So you have the noughts are white people and crosses are black people, and there's a lot of racial tensions, and essentially black people are the things that I suppose you would stereotypically associate with white people, so they are richer, in power, all of those kind of things, and then the white people are poorer and looked down on and all of those kind of things. So it's playing with stereotypes and prejudicial ideas, and the things that happen in the books, Malorie Blackman says, are things that have genuinely happened. So it obviously adds that element of believability and shock. So as I was saying, this is the fallout from book one. You've got Sephi, who has had a baby, and then Jude, who is the brother of her partner in book one, and sort of the interplay between them and Jude's mum and Sephi's mum. Those are sort of the main characters. Sephi is going through an awful lot in the book, some very strong emotions related to what happened in book one, and that affects how she's bonded to her baby, which is very interesting. And if you've been hanging around on this channel for a long time and you know the things that I've written about, that I'm very interested in childhood and birth and breastfeeding, and those were all massive themes in this book. So Sephi has the baby and then she breastfeeds. I was really interested at how breastfeeding was used because traditionally speaking, richer women didn't in the past breastfeed their babies. It was seen as something, that poorer women would do, and that's used in this book where Sephi is like, well, why would I breastfeed? Because she's a cross, and she's from, in fact, a very powerful family. And she has a naught midwife who's like, well, you think that you're so great, you should breastfeed your baby just like everybody else, come on. And so that's interesting, where it uses that. and then breastfeeding is also used as kind of a display in a way of how Sephi is bonding with her child. It's almost kind of, it's not just breastfeeding, it's also things like sort of how quickly she responds to the baby, and how and the name she calls her by, and there's all these various little indicators. But as I say, I was interested that breastfeeding was one of them, and you know, of like how she's feeling as a mother and how bonded she is to her child. Sorry, my phone keeps vibrating. So yeah, from my point of view, I thought that was very interesting that was used, because you don't see breastfeeding all that much in books. So for it to be something that was prominent and important as I suppose as a theme, as an image, that to me that was very interesting, very powerful. At the same time, you've got Jude kind of dealing with what's happened from book one, and he's going through turmoil and looking at how he has relationships and how he treats people and how he thinks. I thought it was amazing how you saw inside his mind and how he was feeling and why he was so sort of volatile, and I really felt for him, which was interesting because he's not a nice character, but you really do have an element of empathy for him. So I really like that. Another theme within the book is music. Sephi gets involved with a band. I'm in a band, so I could see a certain amount. I enjoyed that too, of her experiences of starting to sing with the band and going out and performing. There were a few times where those parts I found a little bit like she was too perfect and too kind of on stage. It's kind of, oh, and she said this and she did this and I could sing that song like that. And to be honest, that doesn't really happen. As much as she may be an amazing singer, it takes an awful lot to sing with a band. It's not easy. It's to be able to sing with a live band rather than with a backing track, and to be able to sort of pick out the right notes and work with something that's dynamic with a band that's responding to you and you're responding to the band. It's not, if you got picked up by a band and they said, we want you to sing, she's given very short notice, it may be a day or 2 days, something like that, you're going to sing within this amount of time, and you're going to be word perfect and not like massively anxious about it, and everything's going to go beautifully. I don't think, not that it does go beautifully actually, but in terms of musicality, that was the only bit where I was like, really? But nonetheless, it was still really fun that there were those themes of music and artistic expression, and yeah, so I still enjoyed that. So I still really enjoyed this book. It had themes that I was interested in. It's still fascinating and makes you think about ideas of race and I suppose everything that goes along with that, and society, and it's a fascinating book. I would really recommend this series. As I say, I'm going to work through them. I gave this 5 stars. I would, again, similarly to when I was talking about Dane's books, that for me the first one slightly edged it on this, but they were very similar. But I did enjoy the first one a little bit more. The first one had so many elements where I was like, what the hell just happened? This one did that a few times, but not quite so much. The first one blew me away. One thing I will say, the way that this book is left, it had this kind of end point where you're like, whoa, what happened there? And then, unfortunately, a section of the next book is put in afterwards, and that spoils how it was left. I was like, don't leave it in this point and then tell me what happens, because that's the point. You want to be able to pick up the next book and be like, I need to know. So that was a shame. But I guess that's just kind of the way that the book was set up, kind of thing. But it's an absolutely superb book and would thoroughly recommend. Then after that, what did I read? I have got no idea. Stop vibrating. People stop talking to me. Then I read, and no, I didn't. What order did I read these in? I think I read this one next. So another indie read. This is Whispers by Crina-Ludmila Cristea. I don't know for sure. Sorry, Crina. Crina also goes by the name Lily Bloom, so I will link her below, but some of her social media things are Lily Bloom Writer rather than Crina. And again, like with Dane, we swapped books, so I sent one of mine and Crina sent me this. This was perfect to read in the run up to Halloween. It's a shame I'm talking about it now really once Halloween is over, but put this in your list for next Halloween. So this is a collection of short stories, and They are all sort of horror type short stories, and let me read you what's on the back. So, because obviously I can't tell you a plot because they're all different. So, nightmares and creatures, trapped individuals, childhood ghosts, drops of rain, drops of blood, stars and snowflakes, trees and roots and birds and flames, life, death, and ultimately light. These short, dark stories will captivate the heart and imagination. Hauntings might occur, you have been warned. So, what I liked about these, they are very short stories. They're maybe 3 or 4 pages, but within that space, they very much create an atmosphere. It's interesting that although it's horror, they aren't horrific, they're really beautiful. Snow is one of the major themes, and wildlife, and they're very delicate and beautiful, but then at the same time there's, you know, horrific scenes, but the way she writes it, they're strangely beautiful. So I thought that was a real skill. I liked some of the short stories more than others. I particularly liked Tender is the Rain, which is very, very emotional. A lot of the stories centre around the idea of love as well. There's an awful lot of kind of relationships and how people feel about each other. She also writes a lot of them from a male point of view. I think most of them, the central character, they're pretty much, I think they're all first person, and yeah, she's writing from a male perspective in a lot of them, which is interesting and very enjoyable. They're also very, there's a lot of sexual themes in them as well. They're very visceral. So yeah, unusual, as I say, in respect to how beautiful they are, because you wouldn't expect that in horror. I would expect horror to be something to disgust. So having something which almost feels like a tribute to horror, like that's just in the way that she obviously really loves it and really, as I say, shows it in a beautiful way. I kind of don't know how to describe it, but yeah, a strangely lovely book. She also has illustrations for each short story that are kind of abstract, which is fun too. So yeah, they're all different, but they definitely have a similar sense to them. Very quickly read, so as I say, if you're in the mood, you could read one in a matter of a few minutes, really. And if you want to kind of get yourself in that mood, so really fun to read at this time of year. They're also quite wintry because of all the snow, almost strangely cosy. So I really enjoyed it. The only criticism I could think of for this really is just the fact that very occasionally you, because Crina is Romanian, a turn of phrase is just like, you can tell that she's not English, if that makes sense. It's just the odd one where you think that's not it's not that it's not English, there's just something about it, like a turn, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that can be a very beautiful thing. And quite frankly, the lady has written this in English that's not her first language, and if I wrote a book in my second language, which would be French, it would be appalling. So yeah, it's absolutely not to say that it's not written in beautiful English, but I hopefully you understand what I mean. There's just the odd little turn of phrase where you think, oh. So yeah, a really, really lovely book. Thank you so much, Crina, for sending me that, and also obviously to Dane for sending me, if I didn't say thank you, for sending me his books as well. It's lovely to read in indie. These are all indie books, and to read such high quality, I mean, all of these indie books I gave 4 stars to. It just feels like such a privilege to be able to read books by people who are indies that are so fantastic. It just shows what amazing books there are out there. So yeah, and horror isn't really my genre either, so you know, great that I enjoyed it so much too. So yes, would definitely recommend that one as well. And then the last book that I read this month was And Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. Now, I came across some quotes by Maya Angelou, in fact when I was writing Milk, some kind of feminist quotes, and that's where I'd come across her before. She wasn't somebody who was really in my consciousness, but she, as I say, I'd heard the odd thing and I thought that's kind of cool, I should definitely read some stuff of hers, but yeah, not somebody that I knew lots about. Then a lady that I worked with had the poem Phenomenal Woman blue tacked in her office, and she used to say, oh, this is my poem. And it's definitely a poem that I associate with that lady because she is a phenomenal woman.